I'm so excited to chat with Shawna Smith today on the Awaken Feminine podcast. Shawna is a women's health advocate and educator, helping busy women find relief from menstrual pain and to love living in their bodies through every phase of life. She's also an international bestselling author, and she recently released her latest book, Keepers of the Earth. And I know she has so much love and wisdom to share with us. She's joining me all the way from North Carolina in the USA. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm excited for our chat. We're doing free flow today, so wherever the conversation takes us, so excited for that. But Shawna, before we dive into our conversation, I'd really love for you to share with us, what is your definition of an awakened feminine?
I feel like this is such a beautiful question because I was just having a conversation earlier today about men not understanding how to be in their masculine and, a big balance between the masculine and feminine. I think that awakened feminine to me means knowing and understanding that there's a give and a take, a surrender and a receiving, and to know that we have this perfect balance within us of these two things, to be giving and receiving simultaneously in balance, and to be honoring that. I feel like there's a lot of focus in the world on the output and the go and things that are external. And the awakened feminine is just knowing that we get to receive, we get to surrender, we get to dance and enjoy and just be present in all different areas of life.
Oh, that's such a beautiful definition. Thank you for sharing that with us. So, Shawna, I would really love for you to share with us a bit more about who you are, because I just really did a very brief description or introduction of who you are. And can you share with us why you do what you do?
Yeah. I grew up in Utah in the United States, and I have such great parents. I just kind of came from this really good background where my parents were very supportive. I could always tell they were doing their best. We all have our childhood things that were like, oh, I grow up and realize I probably would have done that differently knowing what I know about me now, but they did such a great job. And as I've grown and progressed in my healing journey and helping other people come to complete healing, I realized that we can only heal others as much as we've healed ourselves. And so just recently, especially, I've really come into this space of gratitude that I did have such a wonderful and joyful upbringing and childhood, because this has created such a great capacity for me to help people come into complete healing and help them see a different aspect and perspective to relationships, especially traumatic relationships. I deal a lot with toxic motherhood, toxic mother-in-laws, and creating more balance and harmony in ourselves when that's our situation that we're facing. And because I'm coming from that background, I know what it feels like to be outside of trauma. And so I can guide people into that. And so that's a little bit more about me. And I started with hormones and menstrual pain because I realized that this is the deepest rejection of our femininity, right? This is like at the very basic level, we are not accepting and embracing that we are a woman. We're fighting that. We're resisting on that on some level. So if we're not in balance with our menstrual cycle, if it is uncomfortable, if it is a burden, if it is any of the things you hear a lot of women complaining about, even in our media, they make a lot of jokes about that in that direction. And just the other night I was out to dinner and a waiter was like, yeah, when it's that time of the month, I sit in the driveway for an extra hour after work because I don't want to go inside to my wife and daughter. And I was like, that's so sad, right? Like that is what I want to change. So I just felt like when you want something to be different, you start at the beginning. And so starting with the menstrual cycle, and my book, Keepers of the Earth Secrets, is all about that. Like how would I teach my daughters? How would I want every woman to know and understand an introduction to their cycle in a natural, easy way that dads can feel comfortable reading, that they can really connect to in a very natural way? It's the earth, it's nature, it's the seasons. And so that's where I wanted to start, is let's heal that deepest seed of pain that we've rejected.
That's so beautiful. And as you were talking, like a conversation I had with my daughter, she's only 6, about menstruation, because she doesn't quite understand it, but the thought of her bleeding once a month, she's like, I don't want to bleed. I don't want, that's gross. So already at such a young age, she's kind of like, let's push that away.
Yeah, exactly. And you think about it, it makes sense, because for a child, bleeding means they got hurt. So that's something that I liked to address differently with my kids. And I actually wrote the book when my daughter was 6, because I was trying to think, how would I explain this and on what levels, and to have it be like, it's not pain. It's not something to be scared of or to run away from.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Because I was kind of struggling to have that conversation with her, and I basically said, it's really cool that we have this, because we menstruate, so later on, it prepares our body for for babies. I was just like really struggling. So what you're doing is amazing, and I love that, because it's not a conversation, I think, you really have around why and the purpose of, menstruation. Most of the time, when you learn, I remember when I learned about it at school, it was like, hey, there's I can't get the word out, hormonal changes, and then you're going to like bleed, but there's not really that talk about, really embracing the women that you're going to become. And I love that that's the message, and being comfortable being a woman and all the things that come with being a woman. And that's like the message that, you are, putting out to the world.
Yeah, exactly. And I really love how you walked through that journey, because that's what I saw a lot of women experiencing. Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing your background and story there, because that's a really common story that I've heard is, the introduction that we have, and we don't have the right words and we don't have the right tools to just make it very natural. And so I've actually found there's a really easy progression when we start even a little bit younger, like when they're 2, when they're 3, to just see the difference and to understand that there is a difference in, just like, I'll start with my little ones when they're learning how to use the bathroom and they're moving out of diapers or things like that. Like, we just talk about their body, and we talk about anatomy, and we talk about, I have multiple kids. I have boys and girls. So it's a little easier to talk about the difference of boys and girls, and just that there is a basic difference for them to recognize. And at that point in time, I talk about the baby hole, or whatever you want to call it, right? Like, you have one for pee, one for the baby, and one for poo. And like, it's just a very natural, they're like, oh, okay, yeah. And so like, that's kind of the introduction. And then moving forward from there, I wanted to really paint the imagery of it. So in the book, it's less about that. It's not so much the anatomy. It's the, like, this is a release. This is, as a woman, especially, you carry so much of responsibility, of other people's emotions, of just the world. And we are naturally drawn to absorb, to take that into our hearts, to take that into our bodies. And once a month, there's a release, and we can release everything with that. And it's also really fascinating too, because while we've had this culture of like, ooh,
Mm.
like this is something that was meant to nurture human life. It was meant to grow a human being. And it didn't need to serve that purpose, but it's very nutrient dense. It's very high in all of these things. And so as we shed that, it's almost like an offering again to the earth, right? Like we're replenishing a lot of these things. And I know that there are ceremonies and rituals around women actually using menstrual blood in orchards and stuff like that. And I'm not quite on that level, but I just think it's nice to know it's out there, right?
Yeah.
It really does make a difference. And medicine men actually, like way back when, they would take menstrual blood because of its healing properties. It was really good at making cuts and things like that heal faster. It's got a lot of...
That's crazy. My mind just like went poof. Is that a thing?
It just certainly was.
I want to ask you, what was how did you become so fascinated with with our menstrual cycle? And I know you also specialize in, helping people with childbirth as well. So, what was it that really sparks that interest in you to go, this is the path that I'm taking?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it definitely wasn't something that I was like, oh, this is my calling in life. I didn't grow up thinking anything different, and I always wanted to know the best way to take care of my body. I always wanted to know, like, as I went through massage therapy training, I realized there were pressure points that helped you have a more comfortable labor. And so I wanted to learn more about that, how I can have a comfortable labor. Like I never even considered that, to explore all these tools of like, wait a minute, labor can actually be enjoyable. It doesn't have to be painful. And there are ways to make it faster and easier. And so I wanted that knowledge. And that's kind of what started that journey. As I took in that knowledge for myself, I would share it with others. And then people would ask me to help them have a baby. And so I actually started helping people have babies before I had even had any of my own, because I would learn those tools and then I could apply them. And then that just kind of grew into me wanting women to really understand that they had power over their body, that I had some menstrual cramps and some intense menstrual pain as I was under a lot of pressure and stress, finishing out my massage therapy program, starting a business, still going to college full time, and then also working 2 jobs. So like there was so much pressure on my system. And I noticed that made my menstrual cycle significantly more uncomfortable, to the point where I wasn't able to actually perform my job. And so then I started looking at that. I'm like, well, I know all these pressure points, and I used those to fix my menstrual cramps. Within 1 cycle, all of my pain was gone. I didn't have issues anymore. And so I did a couple other things, some yoga poses and stuff like that too. And I was like, oh, this is a really easy fix. And so when I wanted to change the conversation women were having with their bodies, I thought, well, I know the fastest, easiest thing to fix is menstrual pain, because I did that in 30 days.
Yeah.
And so like that was a good starting point. But as I got into it, the passion that came out of it for me is that we accept such a level of discomfort and disharmony inside of our own body as women. And as I tried to share this message of what was possible, I was amazed and surprised at how many women didn't want to change. They didn't want an answer. They didn't want a solution. They would rather, like, it is so easy to fix menstrual pain. It really was like 1 day of me doing a few things, and it brought my body back into alignment. And I was in a very out of balanced place, like I said, underneath all of that stress. And so if I could do that in 1 day, it was very fascinating to me that women didn't want to receive this. They didn't want to be free of the pain. They just wanted to, it was really almost like they accepted that they might be able to mildly make it better. And I was like, no, like we're talking about eliminating it. And they just still struggled to receive. And so that took me into the deeper layers of like, well, menstrual pain eventually leads to one of the primary causes of infertility. And so I thought, oh, well, infertility is very painful, very emotional, very like on all levels, a difficult, challenging journey. And even as I stepped into that, I was like, well, along my journey of helping women have comfortable pregnancies and deliveries and helping women balance their hormones, I've also helped several women conceive in very miraculous situations, like they were told they would never conceive. And one of them had even gone through several rounds of IVF, and it's just like they told her, you'll never conceive on your own. She conceived completely naturally within 3 months of just working with me and her body. And that's possible, right? Your body is so powerful. And yet when you offer this, still, even as I brought that message into the marketplace, women were like, they would rather go with this standard of care. It's like, I'm already on this path, so I'll just keep going. I'm like, you'll go on this path that is more uncomfortable, more pain, more uncertainty than this other path where your body actually heals on multiple layers. So you don't have that pain anymore, and you can get pregnant, and you're in the driver's seat of your own body again. It's so hard for them to make that shift of like, they don't even think that's possible. And so that's really brought out this passion in me about advocating for women's health and saying, you know what?
Yeah.
Let's put the responsibility back in our hands, like coming back to that awakened feminine, like let's awaken to how the feminine is regeneration, to how we can rebirth our bodies, right? That we are the vessels of birth and change and creation. And it is just not right that we are taught to guess and second guess and question our own body, like over and over and over again in all of these journeys. They go in for medical advice. They're told one of 3 options that are outside of them, external to them. They're made to feel like they're doing something wrong, like they need to be fixed, like they're the problem. And that's the solution, right? That's what they hear. And it's like, no, actually, your body is the solution, and you have everything that you need inside of you. So that's where I got very passionate about helping women see how complete healing is possible.
Wow, I love it. And when you're talking, I can just feel how much love you have for what you're doing. It's really beautiful. And I think with women, especially, we have so much trouble receiving, not just, in our, in our bodies, but just in general. It's like we have difficulty asking for help. And then when someone offers help, because they can see us struggling, it's like, oh, no, it's okay. Thank you. And we push it away. So we do have this trouble with receiving in general. Do you find that once your clients work with you and they start receiving, that other areas of their life changes because they are actually able and understand that it's okay to receive?
Yeah. And that was the original intention when I started my program. Is I was looking for women who were used to overgiving. I was looking for the ones who never took time for themselves and always were doing things for other people. And I wanted to help them come into that space of like, you can receive like a lot of the medical issues, things that you're dealing with, reasons why I got you in this program are because at the very, very root, you're having trouble receiving. And that's exactly what it is on all of those levels. To receive is very feminine. And that is why it's the root of conception and birth, right? We must be willing to receive, to be the vessel. And that is really hard in our society. For some reason, we feel like we need to give more than we get on a constant, like, I feel like that's been the feminine message for so long. And it's definitely not a balanced message. We should be nurtured. We should be replenished by what we give.
Yes, I totally agree and resonate with everything that you're saying. I want to ask you, like, through your experience, what have you found to be I don't know if there is a most common, most frequent reason that women feel like they shouldn't receive?
So this is something that I've studied, because when you're looking at bringing things into balance, we naturally tend to, it's just a natural thing, right? If we're having trouble receiving, that means that we're picking up on this other energy. And so the very masculine side of that is the giving, right? Like to give, to put out, to put that energy into the world is more of the masculine side. And so that's what's honored. That's what's promoted in our society. And it's like, what are your grades? What are your academic marks? How are you showing up in the world? Well, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do when you grow up? Right? Like from a very young age, what are you achieving?
Yes.
How are you contributing to society?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I feel like that kind of where it starts is that from the very beginning, it's like, you better be contributing to a better humanity. And we think, okay, well, that shifts that energy into the giving on a feminine level, especially for women, right? Our masculine energy, we all have masculine and feminine inside of us. And so the way we direct our feminine energy in the masculine way is to give output, output, output. And so I think that's really where it comes from, is the strong emphasis on what we look for, how we show up in the world.
Yeah. And I think the feminine is just so exhausted. We're just so exhausted because we're not being listened to, we're not being nurtured, we're not being looked after, because we need to give so much. You're a mum and you've got 5 kids. So I've got 2 and I'm just like, oh my gosh. So I don't know how you do it. I think you're absolutely amazing. But we have been told that if you're a mum, then you need to put everyone else and everything else before your own needs. And then you kind of wonder why mums have, get depression or have meltdowns. And because nowadays it's not just looking after the family, the mums are also expected to go and work and do all the other things as well. So it's no wonder that our feminine is so exhausted and rejected.
Yeah. And it's really fascinating too, because when you start looking at the cycles that we go through in life, we have our testosterone cycle and it peaks in the morning, and we have our estrogen cycle that peaks at night. And every single one of us, men and women, have this. And it enables different things. When our testosterone is high, our mind is really clear and sharp. We're a little more optimistic. Those people that can wake up in the morning, they have a good balance of their testosterone relationship. Whereas then we have this other side, the night owls, right? And they tend to rest more in their estrogen, in their feminine energy. And you look at how society critiques that, not being to wake up in the morning, struggling with that. How are you going to be productive? And the thoughtful creativity that comes with that, and the slower pace, and the observation, and just a lot of the other things, like these people tend to take naps. Who does that? Just so fascinating to see how even in that very basic shift, we have these just ideas around what that means. And it's all subconscious because most of us don't realize that there is an estrogen or testosterone cycle. So we're looking at these other traits about it, being critical of that. And so, yeah, like it would definitely show up in ourselves as well. And it is exhausting at that point if we're not able to rest in our best cycle. If you are more in the estrogen, you just naturally want to wake up more around 9 a.m., 10 a.m. If you're not allowed, permitted to do that, you're going to be tired the rest of the day. And the same thing for someone who's in a high testosterone cycle, they have to go to bed. They don't go to bed, they're going to be tired the next day, like to just be able to honor the cycle that you're in and to nurture that. The way that I do it with 5 kids is I know what my cycle is and I rest in that. And there was some struggle in the beginning because I'm more of an estrogen person. And it's kind of funny to see all of that come to fruition. But as I rested in that, I was like, you know what? I'm a happier person. I'm a more balanced mom. I show up for my kids when I wake up at 9 a.m. And so why am I trying, like in my mind, to set this task of waking up at 6:45 or 7 and, just having that be my schedule? That's not my schedule. I also create a lot from 11:30 p.m. to 2 a.m. And that's a natural cycle for me. I don't get tired. And so as long as I'm honoring that, like it's all fine. And the miraculous thing is my kids can match my schedule because they're young. And I can see, I have more control over that. My kids don't wake up super early, but they've come to match my schedule. So we get to sleep in, wake up around 9, and it all works out. Like I can be present with them and flow with them. And I can also see what their rhythms are too. And so we, like when we're having any kind of issues, when we're having any kind of frustration or kids not getting along, it usually comes back to somebody's rhythm. And I just look at that and I'm like, okay, here's what you're experiencing right now, which might explain this thing that just happened. And they're always like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it gives them power over their body, over their choices, right? Like she didn't make you mad. You're feeling angry. And so deep down, you're also feeling sad. And what's going on with your body too, and looking at that. So that's how we balance things over here with all of these people.
Yeah, that's amazing. Your household sounds so like calm and magical.
It is. It really, and I love the magical part. Like a lot of people will comment on that when they come over. They're like, wow, how is it so quiet? I thought you had 5 kids. It's not quiet all the time, but when they're loud, it's boisterous, it's fun, it's them playing together. Like we very rarely have altercations between them.
That's beautiful. I think you need to write a parenting book. Have you got one?
Actually, I'm working on, I have a chapter in Raising Wild Ones that's coming out in a few months.
Yeah, that's amazing. Very, very interested. What came up when you were talking about all that? So the testosterone and the estrogen cycle. And I love how you brought that, we do have a society where it's like, there's a 5 a.m. club, 6 a.m. club, wake up at 5 to be the most productive. But I'm like you, I'm actually more productive later at night. So yeah, that's just how I roll. But I never even consciously even realize that, it's because of my cycles. Can you share with us how people can find out, what their rhythm or their cycles are?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, like the first place I like to start, and I actually have a free class on this, a free master class that breaks down our 3 primary circadian rhythms. And the beautiful thing is it's math. So when we're born, all of us start our rhythms at the same point. So they all start at 0. And then from there, they cycle on a different daily pattern. So our 3 primary circadian rhythms are 33 days, 28 days, and 23 days. And so you can actually chart these, and they have an app. They have a couple different apps, but I love to use one just called Biorhythm. And it will let you put in your family members' biorhythms as well. And it'll even tell you if you're compatible on certain days or not. So
that's cool.
It's like, okay, we're going to the family reunion. Who should I talk to? Who might I want to avoid?
That's so awesome.
So yeah, kind of funny, but I use that a lot when I go on trips or I have to travel. I want to know what my kids are going to be experiencing and going through, because we experience different things at the highs and lows of our biorhythms. And so I'll know, okay, they're going to need a little bit more alone time because the emotional is low. They're going to be really loud and social and out there because their emotional is high, like just kind of looking at that. And that's something that's really helped. And I teach that to my kids too. So they'll be like, can you check my biorhythms? I'm feeling a little off today. And we'll just kind of look at that. So I find that's the basic tool to start with, is what are your 3 biorhythms? They have secondary ones, but when you're getting started, I recommend just stick to the 3 primary ones. Get to know yourself. Just like when I was helping my aunt in her healing journey, she felt like she had never been in rhythm a day in her life. She's like, there's no rhythm to me. And so I printed them out and I put them on the wall for a month at a time. And so when she came back around, I said, what's interesting? You were craving the exact same foods, thinking the exact same things, and saying the exact same things 30 days ago, because we were creating that log. And she's like, really? I'm like, yes. Like 33 days ago, we were having this exact conversation, because she would lose her momentum. She would lose her motivation. She was morbidly obese, and she really wanted to change that and regain her mobility. And she would just get into this really deep lull. And I was like, look, here we are. And so that's something else that's just very empowering to know, the reason that things change constantly, like no matter how many times you get that schedule down perfect, no matter how many times you've ironed out that excellent meal plan, it seems like right when you're in rhythm, everything changes again. And it does. But the good news is it comes back around next year at the exact same time. So if you figure out your annual plan, then you're pretty good.
Yeah, that's so cool. And is this the aunt that you talked about in Uncensored and Tamed Unleashed?
It is.
Yeah. That was one of my favorite stories, and I cried so much when I read your chapter. So yeah, it was such a beautiful story. So if anyone that hasn't got a copy of Uncensored and Tamed Unleashed, then grab it, even just for Shawna's story. I think it's amazing. I'm in there as well, but I really love Shawna's story. It was really beautiful. Yeah, talking about your aunt and all the things that you had to organize and helping her go through her journey. So that was beautiful. Yeah. So Shawna, I want to ask you, so there's the 3 basic rhythms, and there's an app that, so we were talking about just now that, you kind of go back to the same place again in whatever, time frame that is your rhythm. So do you have any tips for people to kind of like stay on track somehow with what they want to do, because, we have the rhythm, but then it gets very frustrating because like, yeah, I finally got this schedule. Like you're saying, I've got this schedule, I've got all this done. And it's like, and then it just falls apart.
Yeah, it does. It really does. No, this is exactly what I like to teach in my program, especially my 6-week program, is like how to stay on top, basically, right? Like when you understand how to navigate the highs and lows, then you can stay at more of that steady pace. That what I tell people they're looking for is peace, right? Like when we're high, we have a lot of energy. When we're low, we're very observational. We need to nurture. But what you want at all the different stages is just peace, like just to be able to feel peaceful and confident and happy with where you are in that moment. And so when you're going through the lows, you just honor it. You're like, I don't need to achieve right now. Right now is my planning time. Right now is my time to observe, to look around, to process things, to think through them. So I help people flow into that schedule of, we have an observational time. We have a time to network, to connect, to share. We have a time to act on it. This is when we get that energy, like, okay, go full force, put it all out. And then we have a time to review. How did it go? What do we need to tweak? What do we need to change? And this is how we go through every single month. And I actually write that down in my planner and follow my weeks of like, this is my review week. This is my action week. This is my, observational week, so that I can be prepared for my energy, for myself. And I can also start to plug my schedule into that as much as possible. And obviously there are things in life we can't schedule. We just have to be willing to take it. But it's the difference of like, let's say you're moving and you just have to move. And I did this in January. I moved and one of my friends was like, oh, did you schedule it when you had a high biorhythm? And I was like, actually, no. I scheduled it when my biorhythm was 0. And, but because of that, I knew that I was going to ask for help and I was going to receive the help. So I knew that I wasn't going to have the energy to do it. So I brought in people who could help me so that I could just rest and I could just honor that. And I could take those 2 weeks of taking care of my body. And then right when everyone else was kind of, okay, done helping me, I had the energy to now step in and unpack everything in my house instead of being like guilty or, depressed and the other things that come along with moving. I was just able to receive it. Be like, yeah, I'm going to need some help because my biorhythms are 0, but we're still moving.
I just love that. And I love that your friend asked you, did you plan it with your biorhythm? Because obviously all your friends are like, we know how Shawna works, and you probably taught them all how to look at their biorhythms as well. So that's really cool. And I think what I really loved about the message that you just shared is that honoring where you are in your cycle, because most of us find it so difficult to honor the rest period or the observation period, because is that program belief that we always need to be doing something, whether it's busy work or whether it's actual, proper work that moves you forwards to, where you want to go. But I just love that, you're just like, I'm okay with being at peace and honoring where you are, because there's this innate feeling of anxiety for most people. I'm still learning that. I'm a lot better, but gosh, if you told me to rest before, I would be actually really anxious. Whereas now I'm like, okay, I need a rest. So I will step back, because I found that if I keep pushing, it actually is worse. I'm worse off. Yeah,
exactly. And that's part of the power of that is we're told, now in self-care and things like that, we are told more like rest, take care of your body. But if we're resting during a high rhythm, we're going to feel anxious.
Yeah.
Oh, I scheduled this week to rest, and all I can think about is work, because we have the energy to act. We have the energy to do something. So that's why I love to really look at it, because when we're aware, we can pick the right times to rest, and it is easier to step back. It is. And that's kind of the first phase of the program too, is like, it's okay to observe, because we are so programmed not to, but also pick the right time to observe so that you can do it in a relaxed way and be like, oh yeah. And it's so amazing too. I did a winter health retreat, and I did it in Utah, where it actually snows, and people from Arizona came, and they were like, I almost didn't come because I don't want to come to the snow. Like, it's nice and sunny where I am. And but they were so glad they did, because when they stepped into winter, their body immediately kicked in to that observational state that winter brings. And so by feeling it, by stepping into it, they realized, oh my gosh, like in Arizona, you can go all year round. There's no winter that forces the reset. And so they didn't they were like, I can't believe I'm napping. I feel tired. Like, I just want to lay here in front of the fireplace. They got to feel the impact on their body of being in that observational state. So that was really fun and neat to experience it.
Oh, I just love everything that you're doing, and I'm learning so much, and I'm just like, oh, this is really cool. Well, I am, wary of the times that I'm going to ask you, just wrapping up before we finish off, you just talked about self-care and, really looking after yourself. For me, self-love was such a big part of my journey. Can you share with the audience, what does self-love mean to you?
Oh, I love this question, because I feel like on the deepest level, this is what I actually create for people. I see them through the eyes of unconditional love. I can see their gifts, I can see their strengths and weaknesses, and just who their ultimate potential is. And so I love to share that concept in the sense of like, I'm coming from more of like a biblical background, but to love another as you love yourself, we don't have the capacity to love someone else if we don't fully love ourselves. We'll always be limited in the love that we can share based on how we're actually loving and honoring ourselves. Because the number one thing that bothers us in others are the things we don't like about ourselves. Yeah. So when we meet someone, when we come into contact with somebody that we're like, oh, it's usually because we're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
On a different level. Like, sometimes we have to really think about it. But when we get down to it, it's like, oh, I am doing that. And I don't like that. So to me, self-love is having unconditional love for all the different parts of myself, seeing my weaknesses as strengths, seeing the beautiful weakness of my strengths, and just loving both sides.
Mm-hmm. That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Shawna. And last question before we wrap up, what is setting your soul on fire at the moment?
Well, I feel very passionate about creating the next order of health, and something that we're calling well care. That it's right now, our healthcare system is making people sick. And it's not healthcare, it's sick care. We focus all on like symptoms and remedies and fixing a problem that's already there. I want to bring forth a new movement where we focus on being well and creating practitioners that are able to do what I do and to serve that capacity.
Oh, full goosebumps going on. That's so beautiful. I love it. I'm excited to see that being birthed and created. So Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your love and wisdom with us today, Shawna. I really enjoyed our conversation. If people want to find out more about you or how they can work with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, I have a website called Connect with Shawna, SHAWNA.com. That's the best place.
Perfect. I'll have your details in the show notes so people can reach out to you. Thank you once again.
Thank you. I appreciate it.